as set out in today's papers. I call upon Simon Morrall to move the motion of which he has given notice.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to move this motion. The Conservative Group welcomes the government's announcement of a new campaign to tackle mental health, Every Mind Matters, which will be piloted first here in the West Midlands alongside new funding for the Samaritans helpline. Lord Mayor, suicide is a rising epidemic that affects everyone. In England, one person dies every 2 hours as a result of suicide. Suicide is currently the biggest killer of men under the age of 50. Men are 3 times more likely than women to be a victim of suicide, and this gender gap has been growing over the last 35 years. Youth suicide is also a major concern. When you go below the age of 35, suicide becomes the biggest killer of young people across genders. Despite some significant reductions over the last 35 years, suicide still claims 5,688 lives in 2016. Last year, there were 477 suicides in the West Midlands. However, Lord Mayor, this figure may be much greater, as for a coroner to conclude that a suicide has taken place, a strict burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt must be met, which means that the statistics on suicide are likely to be significantly underreported. Lord Mayor, the reason I care about this so much is because I actually lost one of my own friends to suicide in 2016. And it was only this year, in February, when I realised he died because of suicide. In March, I then came across the Project 84 campaign, which was being run by Cllr, which was working alongside ITV. They made 84 sculptures of men, and which each represented a real person who had lost from suicide. They placed the sculptures along the top of the ITV tower blocks in London to basically state the message that each week 85 men lose their lives to suicide. I was deeply moved by it, but also thrilled at the fact that male suicide was now finally getting the media attention that it rightly deserved. So in April, with my election coming up, I went to see Bobby, the leader of the Conservative group, and I told him that I wanted to run my own personal election address in my ward of Franklin. Being the great leader that he was, he told me if it was what I really wanted to do, he wouldn't stop me from doing it. And so I would like to read a snippet from that election address to the Chamber today. I was never taught in school how to start a business, how to file a tax return, or how to stand on my own 2 feet. I had to learn this on my own. I grew up around Great Park, where the local cinema and nursery used to let me skateboard on their car park, providing we stayed clear from the cars and were tidy. This kept me out of trouble, but it also gave me a purpose, as I would burn my own skateboarding films to DVD and sell them for £5. I was 16 making money from a hobby, and I often joked to my socialist friends that skateboarding made me a Tory. Fast forward to today, and I see young men reverting to either a life of crime or recluse away to a life trapped away in a bedroom, checking out of society. Many of our young boys don't have a purpose, they simply exist, and it feels like the mainstream establishment are completely out of touch on this topic. In the UK, the single biggest killer of young men under 45 is suicide. This really hit home for me with my friend Phil. We were polar opposites politically. He was a socialist and I was a Tory, but we would debate all night, putting the world to rights over a pint and a packet of crisps. In early 2016, Phil tragically took his own life, and I spent years not knowing why. In recent times, when politics has become more divided and extreme, Phil reminds me why I got into politics. We agreed that politicians should put their money where their mouth is. They should be passionate about something, and most importantly, they should have purpose. Lord Mayor, that is the reason I am standing in this chamber today. And since then, as you may be aware from the last council, I have donated a sum of my council allowance to the charity campaign against living miserably to help raise awareness of male suicide, and I've continued to bang the drum on the issue. In August, I ran the half marathon to raise money for the cause, and now I've lobbied the Conservative group to be able to bring this issue to Chamber to debate it. Last month, the Prime Minister announced the appointment of the first UK Minister for Suicide Prevention, and also announced plans for the annual State of the Nation report on young people's mental well-being. In the budget last week, the Chancellor has announced an extra £2 billion for mental health services. Meanwhile, the mental health chief of the West Midlands Combined Authority has set a zero suicide target for the West Midlands. As the largest council in Europe, we should strengthen our resolve as a city and have a zero tolerance to suicide. We should aim to smash the stigma surrounding mental health and, as the second city, become the gold standard for the rest of the country to follow. Therefore, Lord Mayor, I ask that the Council notes the Government's third process report on its cross-department strategy preventing suicide in England, requiring every local area to put in place a multi-agency suicide prevention plan by the end of 2017. In Birmingham, an action plan led by the Birmingham and Solihull CCG is in place, but we believe that given the importance of this matter, this should be reviewed and formally adopted by full council to give it greater visibility, as well as partly with other partnerships led strategies and plans. We also call on the Executive to update local plans to reflect new opportunities arise from recent government policy announcements, bring the action plan back to full council for formal adoption and debate, and once adopted, ask scrutiny to track the progress against this action plan, reporting back to full council if the committee believes it is necessary to update. I've got 1 minute left, so I'm just going to do some final thoughts on my friend Phil. When me and Phil used to debate, nothing was off topic. We used to talk about it. To be quite honest, I think Phil was just happy to have somebody to talk to who had a different contrarian opinion. He used to say things like, Simon, taxation is the result of living in a civilised society. And I used to challenge him and say, well, no, taxation is the result of living in a civilised society, uncivilised society. We would constantly challenge each other and strengthen our arguments. And through this, we built an incredibly strong friendship, and I miss him, and I miss our debates. Phil would be delighted to see me elected in his chamber, being able to hold this executive to account. He would also be laughing hysterically to see a Tory standing up here asking for state intervention. I'm not religious, and he was an atheist, but God bless you, mate, and thank you for giving the time.
Thank you.